All right, guys. Regardless of the number of folks in the room, I think we're just going to get started. Merle's leading the session, but I'm just going to pray and we'll just kind of get kicked off. Everyone just close your eyes and we'll just come in at you with prayer here. Dear Jesus, we thank you, Lord, for this morning. Thank you, Lord, for just bringing us here. Lord, despite all the challenges that's been coming against us, Lord, we trust, Lord, that you have a plan and a purpose for this session, Lord, and also for every person here. Yes. We believe, Lord, as we're talking about some heavy truths, some ways, Lord, we can help, and your presence will be with us, Lord, that every word that we speak will be seasoned with salt, Lord. It will be, Lord, according to your will and your purposes, Lord. We trust, Lord, that the word that is released by you, Lord, does not come back to you void, Lord. That there is as we deal with these topics, Lord, that we would do so with grace and with peace, Lord, so that we could convey your peace, Lord, to the world around us. We ask you to strengthen us, Lord, to be able to receive, Lord, what it is that you have in store for us. We ask you to bless us now and let us have a good time of fellowship, Lord, and just conversation, Lord. In your name we pray.
Amen. I am going to ask, because we have a small crowd this morning, is it possible for us to kind of get a little bit closer to the front? And maybe I can just give a minute or two for everyone to get closer. Thank you so much.
Don't be shy, good seats are still available.
We know all of you guys.
I truly appreciate everyone taking some time this morning to come out and kind of figure out, what is this seminar topic all about. For those of us who are not familiar with who you are in the audience, you don't know who we are here up on stage either, we'll just take a few minutes just to kind of do a brief introduction. And I know there's a couple of people that are watching this stream or, on live stream as well. Welcome to those who are watching outside of Miami, Florida for this morning. My name is Tonny Thomas. I've come here from Chicago. It's my husband, Tony, next to me. And we're excited to be here at this year's PCNAK. And we have a couple of challenging, a little bit difficult topics to unpack this morning. But we are staying in prayer and believing that the Holy Spirit will lead us and kind of guide us through the conversation for the morning.
Right. So I've already introduced the form that's available on the app, so that you can talk back to us when we get to the Q&A session. We'll be able to see what the responses are. So if you've got a question or something you want to interact with us, the PCNAK 2019 app, there's a section called Feedback Forms, and under that there'll be an Open's event suggestions, so you should be able to submit some questions to it.
My name is Pastor Josh Joseph. I serve in Chicago at the International Pentecostal Assembly, and I am also adjunct faculty at Christian Life College, where I teach systematic theology.
Okay, and just to kind of give a little bit overview, so this session kind of lasts all the way till about 10:45 this morning, and we've kind of split it up into two parts. So the first part, each of us will kind of share our personal connection that we have in dealing with topics of grief and loss on a personal level. And then we'd love to kind of interact with those of you who are here in the audience as well, and then anyone who's watching on live stream. People who are in our Indian or Salvation community and have been blessed to be in a career that also asks them to utilize a lot of the skills to work with people, clients or patients that are dealing with grief and loss, and possibly how can they take those skill sets and bring them into the church community and utilize those skills in the church part of it. So we'll have a little break between the two. I just wanted to kind of share the overview. And just to kind of get a little bit more into my individual connection, I guess, with the topic and loss. It's not exactly an exciting topic. And I know that when people had asked, about this seminar, and, when you have a chance to kind of share, you want to, talk about it to other people and, bring them into the seminar. Well, it was kind of difficult to get excited about this topic and to kind of encourage people to come in, because it's not about missions, it's not about evangelism, it's not about outreach or, working with the community in one sense. It's a little bit more of a sobering topic, if you will. So, but that being said, I guess, my earliest connection with the topic kind of dates back to 2006. I was about 25 years old, growing up in Dallas, Texas, and my mom had been battling breast cancer for about 2.5 to 3 years at that point. And we were very active in one of the Indian churches in the Dallas-Fort Worth community. And we were, my sister and I, she was about 19 at the time, and we were very connected to the community, very active in the church, growing up there. And in 2006, Mom passed away. And so she, just having that, growing up and having that event, being a milestone in our life, like that left a hole, in our hearts for a long time. And it's still something to this day in my 30s that I, still deal with. But that was one of my, earliest connections to that. And then, we have a small family. It was just my dad, myself, my sister, and mom. And so, when that happens and you look at your family pictures over the years and there's a person missing, from the picture, and each one of us in our family kind of dealt with the loss of mom in a different way. And that was something that was really difficult because we've never kind of been trained as a family. How do you talk about death? Do you even talk about death? How do Malayalees and being a Christian, what's the appropriate way, to kind of handle that, even within your home? And so those are some of the challenges that over the years that we kind of went through. And then more recently, in January of this year, the Lord saw that it was fit to take my dad as well. And so that one was a little bit more raw, if you will. And so now, both my parents are in the presence of the Lord. So that brings me a lot of joy that I know, where they are and who they're with. But the reality of it is that I remember after the first couple of weeks, even, the first month or two after my dad passed away, my sister and I had a conversation about, gosh, in one sense we're orphans. And I don't think that's a term that I had ever connected with myself before. Because when you hear that term, usually you think of little children or people who have been, maybe abandoned by their parents, or they're living in a third world country and they don't have the means to, take care of their children. And so when I think of orphan, that's what comes to mind. But the blessing of being a believer, and I'm grateful for parents who have deposited, their faith from an early, stage into our lives, is that we know that we should not, or we ought not to dwell on that topic, right? Like we shouldn't kind of put a label on us and kind of feel like that's what we are, that's what we're always going to be, and we're never going to be able to get past that, because that's exactly what we keep reading in the Word and encouraging ourselves with the truth of God, that the Lord is our caretaker, and He always has been. Whether your parents are present or not, it's always God, right? And He's always with us. And so those are a couple of the truths that I have been, talking myself through, and God has been putting a lot of people over the years into my life to kind of talk with me about this topic. And back in 2006, to be honest with you, when my mom passed away, that was not very common, because not that people weren't dealing with, terminal illness or elderly were not passing away, it's not that didn't happen, but in that, Malayali community that I was growing up in, it was kind of rare that somebody's parents, were dying. And so I think being part of the community at that time, it was something that even the community wasn't familiar with, how to walk somebody through that type of loss. And that's a challenge, that I had to kind of find out for myself, figure out resources and people who would be supportive of me over the years. And I was doing a lot of it myself, which led to a lot of personal conversations and connections with people that the Lord started putting in my way over the years. So that's just a little background, if you will, to my personal connection. So maybe I'll have everyone else on the panel share theirs as well.
Sure. We all have our experiences with loss, right? Whether it's a loved one who's, father, mother, sister, brother kind of thing, or within our own community. For me, I think part of the reason I'm on this panel, it's not nepotism, right? It's not because I'm her husband only, but because when you look at grief, and when Merlin and I were talking about this, there's so many different slices to it, right? There's so many different dimensions. So for Merle, she was experiencing that event through the eyes of a daughter, through the eyes of of someone who has lost a parent. For me, it was a really crazy event because for the first time, I think, I was in a room with in kind of a funeral situation, in a grieving situation, and I was the oldest person in the room. And within the Malayali context, what Josh said yesterday is absolutely true. We're still considered like kids. This is still sometimes considered a youth service just because it's in English. But we are getting to the stage where we are the oldest people in the room. And people are looking to us to have the answers. And I don't have the answers. And so there's that kind of dimension. We're now the ones who need to be directing, and we have no clue. Another dimension of this is how do you be a spouse that's dealing, that can support my wife through this situation. And there's really no guidance around that, right? In one sense, you don't want to step into the midst of a child who's grieving for her parent, but at the same time, you have to be there to support, to encourage, to try and just embrace in that situation, while also dealing with the grief that for me, me and my father-in-law, we had our disagreements, but I really respected him and I loved him. And I think he knew that, despite our disagreements. So I'm dealing with that grief while at the same time, understanding that hers is just so much greater. So there's so many different slices to this, and even beyond that, how we deal with grief. Both me and Merle are, in some respects, introverts. So when you have a unique community that tends to be very kind of like jump in there and like 6,000 people show up, right? There's a stream of people all the time, and sometimes it's a little bit more difficult even as an introvert to deal with that. So when you look at all of these different slices, I don't think there's one solution that'll fit everybody. There's commonality, but I think within that we also have to be respectful of how each person is going to be dealing with this individually. So I think a session like this is needed because when we also look back at the support that was given and in terms of even the knowledge, right? So we talked about, we came home and we spoke to Pastor Josh because he was so kind to call us and give us some practical tips about how to deal with a funeral parlor. And that was a huge help, just that, the practical, hey, look, these guys are going to be trying to be more corporate, so they're trying to, be a little bit more in terms of, getting money out of you, right? To not sugarcoat it at all. Versus if you go with a family kind of home funeral parlor, it's going to be a little bit more graceful, a little bit more understanding of the situation. Something like that. Even having practical suggestions was really not there at that time. So for us, coming back and saying, hey, maybe there's an opportunity here to both practically as well as beyond that from a spiritual and a counseling side support families and church members who are going through this process. That's my connection to it.
So I think everyone here has had experience with death, grieving, loss. If you haven't yet had the passing of something significant, at some point in your life you will experience that. And so the question is, how do we prepare for something like that? I don't think there's anything that you can ever say, I walk away from the session and now I'm fully prepared. Loss, death, grieving, it's been here since Abel, right? So we have generations of humanity going through this. But within the South Asian community, our own community here today, how do we handle this? I'm coming from this perspective of looking at this from a cultural perspective, a biblical perspective, because so often we conflate the two. Our culture is the Bible, and our Bible is the culture, right? Let me ask this question. I think maybe it's something that you guys can all relate to. If you ever came home from school and had a test, you got 97%, how did your parents react? I don't know about you guys, like my friends, they got a 97%. Wow, their parents were thrilled. I got a 97%, wondering where's the other 3%, right? Because the Indian culture, not to knock the Indian culture, but this is a reality, it's an honor-shame culture. Many of the Eastern cultures are. And this really comes to a head when we come to topics such as grief. No, you don't behave that way. You don't act that way at a funeral. And a lot of the statements can come off as very harsh to a soul that's very hurting. And possibly they can interpret that as being hurt by the church. Maybe they actually are being hurt by the church or the pastor. So how do we help our community grieve well? Because the truth is, no one's grief looks exactly like someone else's grief. Everyone has their own pathway of grief. So how do we love people well? How do we shepherd people well? How do we deal with our own grief well? This is something that has to be processed. If it's not something that we process, it'll come up later in life as a deeper pain. And so this is why I think this conversation is so important. And I'm hoping that each of you would, so please, if you have something that you want to share, I think Merle's going to give us the heads up on that, but a hand raised if you want to jump in on the conversation, we'd be more than happy to welcome you in on this.
Yeah, definitely. So this is not going to be one of the sessions where, you have to wait till the end to ask a question or provide some comments or something. We're totally open and flexible. If at some point, while we're speaking, if the Lord puts something on your heart, or, like Pastor Josh said in the beginning, coming here together, there's something that unites all of us in this room. Either you have experienced some kind of loss at some point already in your life, or maybe there is a situation that you're going through at the moment, and it could lead to a loss, and you're not quite sure how things are going to turn out. Or possibly you're here on behalf of somebody else. You've got a really close friend. Maybe they're not here, they're living elsewhere, and how do you walk that person through a loss that they have gone or are going through. So for whatever reason, you've chosen to be here today. So while it's not as I said in the beginning, an exciting, way of connecting with somebody, we're here together, and so just being here is a form of support. And so, please don't, hesitate to ask anything or participate. There's no way that there's going to be a wrong question or a wrong way to ask anything. So just wanted to put that out there at the beginning. And maybe, something that we had kind of talked about earlier is that there's different kinds of loss, right? And so depending on what season of life that you're in right now, for people who maybe have had a child, that's something in the community that Tony, myself, and Pastor Josh are involved in. We're parents of young children, and a lot of our peers are as well. And there have been those that have lost a child, and so that's one area. For some people, it's a miscarriage. They've been expecting a child and looking forward to the birth of a child, and that's not how the story ended. And so that's another kind of loss. And then, we talked about loss that is expected kind of versus unexpected. I think, when I think back to how my mom had battled, cancer for a while, and then ended up passing away, in one sense, I mean, you could say, oh, well, maybe you knew that it was coming, so it was, it should have been easier, should have been easier for you to manage or for you to deal with. But to whoever says that to me, I say no. Just because you were there kind of, thinking that this could be the way that things end, it doesn't make the grief any better. It doesn't make you any more prepared to deal with it. And you think about, who that person is, it's your mom, right? There's no substitution for that. There's no, plug, for that hole in your heart that person, has left behind. And so, I think, one of the topics in preparation for today that a friend of mine had asked me, she said, are you going to cover what to say and what not to say? And I think all of us can kind of, have a piece to share about that. I don't know if those in the audience would agree with me, or even, those who are up here on stage with me would agree, but I feel like sometimes in the South Asian community, it not only is it an awkward topic to talk about, but a lot of times it goes more into, really, I would just wish that person hadn't said that to me. Because there's a culturally, or I should say culturally, there's an appropriate way to kind of express, that you're grieving alongside with somebody. And I feel like a lot of times in our community, that doesn't get expressed the right way. And so, whether it's somebody in my parents' generation that's trying to let me know that they understand my pain, or they're grieving along with me, or they understand my loss, I think it's just maybe the way they express it, the words that they use, doesn't always come out very well, and so it's misinterpreted. And at that time of loss, and when you're dealing with a lot of emotions that are on edge, it's just maybe something to be weary of, that maybe that's not the best time to kind of express to somebody. I'll share kind of a personal story. I remember, I was going through grad school when my mom passed away back in 2006, and I was very connected to the group of graduate students that were in the same program with me. And I had a really mixed cultural group. I had a friend who was Chinese, I had a friend who was American, I had a friend who was Pakistani, and we were pretty much just a very, multicultural group. And I remember my friend, she was Muslim, and it was her faith, and the morning that my mom passed away, that was a very heavy exam weekend that was coming up for Monday. And I, had all these plans, for study groups and all that. And she was one of the first people that I had to text and kind of start, canceling all my plans for the weekend. She asked me for my home address. I didn't think much about it. Mom had just passed away a couple of hours ago. And you think about what to do and what not to do. It was amazing. Within probably 2 hours, she was at my home. She lived probably an hour and a half away. She was at my home. For the first time, came to visit. Mind you, she's not Malayali. She's not a Christian. She doesn't know, traditionally how do Christians mourn, or how do Indians mourn. What's the appropriate way to kind of express grief? But she came over to my home, and it was the first time. And she walked into my kitchen, and she started doing dishes. She just picked up the dishes and started washing dishes in my home. And, this was 13 years ago. But that memory is so fresh on my mind that she didn't ask. She didn't walk into my home and ask me a single question. She didn't ask, what can I do? What do you need? She just, took action. And I think to those of us who may be wondering what to say, what not to say, a lot of times it's not about words. It's not about what, comes out of your mouth. Because I think a lot of times people think it's what I say that can express that I'm grieving with you, or that I'm supporting you. But I think I'm here to say, especially during those early, days of walking alongside with somebody, it's really not what you say. It's probably, for me, it was more about what you do. It was more an action-based way of showing support. I don't know if others on the panel.
No, I think 100% from my experience as well, which is when I think back to that situation, the worst thing that you could do was give platitudes. It's not that it's not right; it just doesn't show any compassion towards those that are grieving versus those that just kind of help, like just kind of took up some burden and ran with it and made my burden lighter. Those are the things that are truly appreciated. And beyond that also, nonverbal communication is not very big in the Magali community. We don't touch each other, right? But some hugs that we got along the way. I mean, you didn't have to say anything, just give me a hug, right? At that point, it just showed that depth of like, hey, I feel you. I don't know what to say right now. I don't know, how I can make this better, but I'm here with you right now. That made a huge difference for me. So those two things, like just practically doing something. On the other hand, Pastor Josh would probably smile at me, but there were times where it felt like folks were coming over, and it was more of a burden on us because now we had to go and like chase after or serve those that were coming into our house, and it was just like that's an Indian thing. That's it's a tough thing to get over. But on the other hand, there were aunties who came in and started the dishes and started helping out that I truly appreciate. And I used to have some arguments with my father-in-law about he wanted to repay everyone for all the good things that they've done for him. But I still remember the people that came and helped during that time, and I'm grateful for them. So.
And I know I'd love to hear from people who are sitting here. What are some of if you've gone through a loss, and it doesn't have to necessarily be death, but in any grieving situation, what are some of the things that you've heard that were helpful? And what are some of the things that you heard that maybe were not so helpful? I'd love to hear that from you guys. And I'll just talk a little bit while you guys are formulating your thoughts. But a friend of mine that immigrated from India recently, I had a conversation with him. Actually, he didn't immigrate so recently, but he's a 1.5 generation. And he was saying, we were talking about this Indian nonverbal communication. It's like we were in this men's Bible study. We had this conversation. It's like, you know what? Has your dad ever told you I love you? No one here, everyone's like, no. We don't talk like that. And the guy that was a 1.5er, he said, you know what? There's no phrase like that in Malayalam. Now, I'm born here. Okay, I can't verify this. I have not tried to verify this, so take it at face value. There's sneham, there's words for love. No, but even think about the Indian movies you watched. When they say I love you, it's always saying I love you, right? Because in Malayalam, you don't say that. There are other ways that it's expressed. But if you're born here, you're expecting this kind of relationship. Well, that's not culturally what's attuned. Now, I want to take this to a scriptural place. In the Hebrew tradition, there was a way of coming alongside people who were mourning, and it's called sitting Shiva. If you look at the Bible, this is what Job's friends were doing when they first came, and Job was grieving what he was going through. When they first came, they came and sat with them. Job's friends, for all their faults, they did good in that, right? They came, they sat, no one spoke a word. They were just grieving with him at this loss. It's when they opened their mouths that, okay, they kind of messed up. But sometimes that's what's needed. Merlin talks about acts of service. Service, absolutely, but sometimes when you don't know what to say, you don't have to say it. Just be present. Be next to the person. I think that's a way of helping and a way of healing.
Yeah, most definitely. And then maybe now would be a good time maybe to just kind of ask, those who have joined us in the audience, if you would willing to share, what kind of brought you to this session. I know you have a couple other options this morning, but maybe there's a personal story that you're willing to share, or maybe there's a question that we haven't touched on, and when all of us are here together, we're here to support each other. Maybe that's something that we can kind of find.
Our audience has decided to sit shiver with us.
Just in case you guys don't know, clearly Pastor Josh is our pastor, so we tend to be a little jovial.
In the case, like, where a person wants to be left alone, how should you approach that? How should you approach that?
That's a great question. So the question just, I'll let you talk about this, but the question, if you didn't hear, was, in the case where you want to be left alone, how do you express that?
Like, how would you approach a friend who wants to be left alone?
How would you approach a friend who wants to be left alone?
So
That's great.
would you comfort them instead?
Yeah, yeah.
I can take that one. It's a very common question. And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about different types of personalities that people have. And, in your case, if this is a friend that was very social, maybe, very bubbly, chatty Cathy, maybe before, experiencing a loss, and then kind of flipped into a different personality. I think for yourself, I think there's probably a little bit of kind of like shock, like, hey, you're not the same, as you were before. So giving a little bit of space, I think, is always good, just so that, you have some time to kind of formulate, your thoughts as well. And just kind of observing somebody's behavior patterns over those first couple of weeks, even into the first couple of months after they're dealing with a loss. I think that's good. But if it's completely like a person who is just not responding to any phone calls or text messages, or maybe if you're close by, you can actually visit them, and they're just flat out refusing any form of contact. Now, obviously, depending on how old they are as well, I think that's probably when I would kind of think that, there's something or somebody else that I should reach out to get connected to that person. If they're, high school age or less, especially, I kind of tend to be really weary about that age group. And if they're college, age, adult, and older, like I said, it's probably more so trying to figure out what their personality is like. I don't know if that helps a little bit.
And if I might also add on to that, none of us are experts, right? Like, nobody's got the answer. But one thing for me was, I'm an introvert, right? So both of us are in some respects. And we do like to be sort of left alone. But what I found most valuable was, for those people that couldn't be there, little acts of thoughtfulness, particularly, and I don't think we've talked about this yet, but in Indian circles, the funeral is a big to-do. Everybody and their mother shows up, and it's a packed house. And the day after, everyone's gone, and you're left with your grief on your own. And all those kind of acts of service are just kind of concluded. That's the time, I think, that where even if you're an introvert, you appreciate thoughtfulness. So for us, there were folks who ordered food for us. They didn't want to intrude on our space because we were still grieving, but they just ordered food for us and called us and said, hey, look, we got dinner covered, or hey, look, we're taking care of this, or whatever it might be, cutting the lawn, whatever it is. Those kind of things, I think, nonverbal, right? Not something that you want to intrude into someone's space, but just showing that thoughtfulness. That means a lot. It makes you feel like you're not alone.
And I think what was first said about really just paying attention to the person's personality before and after, just being attuned to it. I think all of us want to run in with the right answer. But a big part of it is just listening. Coming alongside and listening. And if they express, hey, I just want to be left alone right now, give them some time to be alone, but let them know I'm here if you need me. I had a friend of mine that in their family, the grandfather passed away. And this young guy was basically for the entire gambit of like the wake, funeral service, running majority of the programs, the pastors that needed to speak taking care of like people who were flying in, making sure they were in a place to stay. So the whole time he's running around. And at the end of all of it, after the funeral, I come to the house, and he's upstairs in his grandfather's room crying, bawling his eyes out. And his mother's like, he's up there crying right now, and he won't come out. And I said, let him cry. This whole time he was taking care of everyone else, and he didn't have time to grieve. Give him space to cry. Sometimes we get so uncomfortable with tears, like it's not supposed to happen. But if you look at the Psalms, like literally, as you read through the Psalms, some of the deepest lament is there. And this is Holy Scripture. This is what God said. This is inspired Word of God. This is deep. And we have to create a space where we as a community understand that lament is part of what we're supposed to walk through. So I think it's a great question. And I think this piece of listening before we respond, don't just jump in with trite answers, you know? Into that. Two important things. You have to care for this person. I think there's a book titled When Bad Christians Happen to Good People. It's like when animals attack, you know? Like it's you've seen this. You've seen this, like, it's a train wreck, and you just want to look away, but you can't look away. You don't want to be like, well, this is it, and you, at the same time, these questions, maybe it's a Holy Spirit moment where you can be like, this is what I believe, and I want you to be in a better place. Again, we can't preach that person's father into heaven, but you got to speak the truth in love. And if there, what would be like this? It sounds like this is a concrete example from your life. Was there a specific question that was asked, or was it just kind of a dialogue?
It was a dialogue of my dad. I've never seen him again. Don't know. And like, and it's just she's pain. Like that might be the case.
In the case of that person, I would say, you know, there are good times you had with your dad, and I would talk about that truth. Offer comfort where we can. And I don't know the extent of how much you do for dad or anything like that. But offer seeds of hope that this person, not the person that deceased, but this person you're speaking with, can come to more than what this life offers. Is that helpful? Other thoughts?
Yeah, maybe I can quickly add to that. You know, when I shared with a colleague at work a couple of months ago that my dad had passed away in January, and you know, she didn't really, you know, respond much after that. And then I saw her in person probably a couple of months after, and she shared with me that she had, at that point, lost her mother. And it was actually her grandmother who had adopted her, but she considers the grandmother to be her mother. And I know that this colleague is a Christian. I don't know how strong her walk is with the Lord, but she's a Christian, and we've had a couple of conversations about our faith. And she had, at those conversations, mentioned to me that how her grandmother was the one that instilled a lot of that faith. And so when I found out that, you know, she had passed away, you know, I know that she's a believer, so it's not that, you know, she didn't have a hope. But even still, she, you know, was very transparent with me, saying that she's struggling with the fact that she is a Christian, and that she knows that, you know, that there's a positive way that she can choose to grieve, but she's not sure that she's choosing that option, and that she was going to seek therapy, actually. And I applauded her for that. I said, that's great. I'm glad and I'm happy to hear that, you know. But at that moment, you know, what she said to me is that she finds it challenging to go back into the work atmosphere, into everyday life, as if nothing had happened. Because the world around her has no clue that this person who was so pivotal in her life had just died. The world had no clue. And for her, that was, I think, the most challenging thing. Not so much about finding comfort and peace in the afterlife, but to find out that there's nobody that could connect with her about the days that her grandmother was alive. And so maybe going back to your question and kind of connecting with Pastor Josh was saying as well, offering to let this person just kind of talk about the good times that she had with her father, and you may not have known him either, but just to let a person, vent in one sense. Even like other opportunities where you take somebody out to lunch or take somebody out for, a coffee or whatever, and let them choose a thing that brings them joy, a memory that they can celebrate, and be that person to initiate a conversation. Because a lot of times the person that's going through grief and that's dealing with loss, they at some point find it awkward to always be talking about their loss. They feel like they're putting a burden on the person on the other side. And so if you are the one on the other side, I know it's been a couple of months since your loved one passed away. How are you doing with that? Or, just bringing up, if you find that it's appropriate, that you find like this person's not kind of, fall apart emotionally as soon as you mention that their loved one passed away. If you think they can, handle that conversation, be the initiator for a change.
Even in war-torn areas, when they have refugee camps, often if they have counselors that are talking with children from these situations, they'll bring out paper and pencils or crayons and allow kids to draw. Because even in that, they're able to express themselves in some way. Our grief has to find expression. Now, that looks different for everyone, but that's a healthy part of helping someone process this. So if someone is going through something, they're not of the faith, you can still love them. You can still show love and show care and help them process their grief. So that's what we're called to. We're called to be salt and light. Those who are healthy don't need the physicians, those that are sick. So let's go be what God has called us to be.
Sorry, one thing, so we're just about to shift into the second half of this, so I'm going to go off and be technical support for a second, but I wanted to do one last thing, Merle, before I kind of, exit stage left here, which is to also talk about the practical, because, we had, a couple of losses within our church as well, and for one of them, we had a simple question, saying, what about live stream, right? And trying to find who the live streaming companies are. I don't know if there's a package of information or something that we can prepare for those within our community to say, here are some things to think about when it comes to a funeral. Here are some things to think about when it comes to funeral parlors, right? Those kind of practical tips and suggestions. And so what I want to just emphasize is, we should continue this conversation for whether it's people watching the live stream or those who are here. Let's continue this conversation after these sessions as well, and try to come together to find a way to support those that are grieving, so that it's not so hard, right? We're instead of grieving, we're spending our time doing planning what these contracts have in them. Those kind of things, if we can help alleviate some of those burdens through, some of the ongoing conversation, that would be great. So as I head off into the sunset, I'd love to leave with you guys that, whether it's connecting to Merle or Pastor Josh or Pastor Wilson, who will be up here in a few minutes, or Pastor Sam, let's continue to try and find ways, I think, to practically help also. In addition, that's my piece. I'm off. Thank you.
Just to kind of tag on to what Tony was saying, one of the main purposes and kind of hope that we had in putting this seminar together, both part one and part two, is really, at the end of this, can we come up with some sort of like a toolkit for our community? Is there like a roadmap or something that we could provide people? So, in your local church, if a loss or a death, happens, generally the burden is immediately put on the pastor, right? Like the pastor should have the answers to all the questions, about, how to, help the immediate family that's going through loss. And then what are the practical steps? Who are the people that you should call? What's the order of operation? How do you deal with the medical community that needs to be involved, right? And so let me tell you, from being involved in the Indian church for so many years, the pastor does not have the capacity to have the answers to all these questions. And Pastor Josh is here on stage, and I'm sure he would, agree with me as well. There are certain things that all of us are kind of called to in our community. We have been given gifts and talents, and it's especially at times like these that these gifts and talents ought to come out. So if you know that you have a way to kind of help coordinate a process in your local church so that it's more of a streamlined approach, then work with your leadership, work with your pastors to kind of put that together. And then if you happen to be in a small church and you don't have enough people, to do that, reach out to people who are, in some larger churches in the Indian community in your area. And that's really my hope, that these churches and communities can work together and we're not siloed, and that we're willing to share our gifts, and we're willing to share our resources so that we can build each other up outside of our immediate church. And so, for those of us, right now we're based in, Florida for this event, but you're visiting from all parts of the country. So you might be, somebody who's in Texas, or you might be in California, that's your local church, that people in that area connect to, so that you don't feel like you're going through this alone. And especially, one thing we didn't get to touch on, but just with the Indian community, we talked about how everyone, runs distance, and the funerals are generally very large in number, and, a couple of hundred people are coming for these services. Well, you go through that for 2 or 3 days as the people kind of stop visiting, and the phone calls and the questions and the text messages, they kind of dwindle down, over the next couple of weeks, and filters out. And so how can we, still be present as a church community for the people that are going through loss? Because theirs hasn't stopped, right? Their needs haven't stopped. And so maybe we can provide some sort of practical, tools and skill sets so that we can put something together. So I think maybe that's kind of a wrap for the first part. Yes, and we'll just take. Oh yeah, so we're gonna just kind of dive straight into part 2, and so I was just gonna say, like, the allied health professions, if you will. Maybe a physician here that has utilized, ways to help patients or clients deal with grief and coping with loss. And you may be a nurse, you may be in the mental health profession. So I'm gonna connect that. I know there's a lot of crossover with what we do in our day-to-day, lives as our career and our professions, and how do we bring that into the church context and the church community. So for the second half, I am just going to be helping to moderate this session, not be speaking so much. I'm not in a medical health profession by any means. So, but Pastor Wilson is a chaplain in the city of Chicago, and he also pastors a church, Good Shepherd Church, and so I'll let them do their individual introductions as well. And then we're also going to be joined on the phone by Pastor Sam Abraham, and I'm not sure if he's already on board as a social worker in the city of Chicago as well, but he's also a minister in the city. And so we're going to let these 3 gentlemen kind of lead our conversation for the second half of the session. And I will let each of them kind of do their own introductions, and then we'll take off.
Thanks, Merlin. My name is Jared, and I also am a board-certified chaplain, mainly working with hospice patients and in a hospice care setting. I also have a background in nursing together.
I'm still Pastor Josh. Can you talk about Sam Abraham? Is he online?
Yes, is Pastor Sam on the line? Hello, Pastor Sam?
Hi, good morning. I'm on the line.
Great, if you could just do a little introduction.
Oh, sure. Well, you guys are,
melting
it's
in my
humid here, but as the best of both worlds, Church in Arlington Heights. I work with our youth ministry and our English ministry. And like Marley said, I'm also a clinical social worker, but I have worked for years as a therapist in various locations. I'm currently working for the Department of Veterans Affairs as a management analyst for their central office.
Okay, thank you.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we were able to hear you. Thank you.
Great. As part of my career, I also work in a hospice setting. And for those that don't know, hospice provides care for patients with terminal illness. So as part of that experience, I've worked closely with families that have experienced what we call anticipatory grief, and then bereavement after the loved one has passed away. I had to undergo the grief that comes from losing both of my parents. My father when I was 8, and my mom when I was in my 30s. So I'm hoping to be part of this panel, both as a professional, a pastor, and also someone who's experienced bereavement.
So thank you. Thank you to each of you kind of sharing your professional background. I think I'm going to probably begin with one of our first topics where each of you would kind of share why you feel like it is important to bring up the discussion of grief and loss within the South Asian community. We'll start with Pastor Wilson, and then Pastor Josh, and then Pastor Sam.
Yeah, so in our community, it's not, of course, grief and loss is something we're all going to experience. Death, like earlier we talked about, if you haven't experienced death or dying in your family yet, you will sometime or the other. And the best thing we can do is to be ready and prepared and know about it. So when it is happening, we're not caught off guard. In our community especially, I feel like the discussion on grief and loss, even church sometimes, we tend not to discuss too much or talk too much about grief or loss. And even the, especially in our South Asian community, I mean, I've been in situations where the doctor walks into the room and has something to speak to the family, and the family says, can we talk about this outside, because we don't know about, but the children don't want him to hear because they think it's going to cause him or her pain. So this mentality of protecting and masking grief, which starts very early, like don't talk to my dad about this because he will be just devastated. A lot of it is, like Pastor Josh said, we're dealing with grief in different layers, or grief in general. Then you add to it the cultural layer, with South Asians, masking it, don't talk about it. And then if you're a Christian, is it okay to grieve? How long is the grief process? People may say things like, hasn't it been a year since your loved one passed away? You should get over by now. You're a Christian, you should not be grieving. Of course, Paul says don't grieve like those who don't have hope. Again, they don't remind that it's about hope of eternity, but not the hope of grief related to separation. So these kind of things, you add layers and layers of, culture, religion. Grief can take very complicated form. In our community, if we don't talk about it, it's something people are going to deal with it privately. And just a few days ago, I think we talked about that's happening in our community now at very young ages. I know in Chicago, people who passed away in their 20s, sudden death, and then there's deaths that were expected, and then there's complicated deaths that's happening. Hospice is a different kind of death. So how do we prepare for this? And I think in our community, we should discuss and talk about this, to at least say it's okay. So in that sense, I think it's very relevant to our community.
Pastor Josh, what would be your perspective as a minister, currently ministering with?
In ministering in the South Asian community, I want to say that the Indian community in general, we're very culturally tight-knit, right? very close. And that community can be a strength. But it also is a double-edged sword. Sometimes the community can be too heavy as well. So again, what we said earlier about listening and coming alongside is a big part of it. I'm going to show my nerd side a little bit here. Anyone Star Trek fans? No? Star Trek? Yes? Okay, we got one. Come to the altar. We're going to... No, just kidding. There's a Klingon culture, very rough exterior, and they have this saying, if you're a Trekkie, you know this, the Klingons, what happens in the family stays in the family. Right? It really applies to Indians as well. What happens within the family stays within the family. And so we have this idea that we have to show this exterior hardness. And the truth is, grief doesn't always work well in those kinds of situations. So how do we grieve within our community? How do we grieve within our family? How do we grieve on our own? I think what Pastor Wilson was saying is definitely like all these different layers. It's very
Tackling the question about why this is important to be important enough of a topic to address in the South Asian community. So he was just sharing his perspective, as a minister in the community, and then Pastor Wilson was just sharing it, in his dealing with being a chaplain and dealing with hospice. So we just wanted to kind of see your perspective as well and why it's important to have this discussion in the South Asian community.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mervyn. I think from a cultural perspective, we have a difficult time dealing with grief, especially the expression of grief. One of the things I was talking to Merle about when we were planning this was how hard it is for church members to be able to support those who are going through grief, because there's this feeling like we have to do something. And the issue with grief is that it's more important to be present than to know the right thing to say. So I think it's vitally important that we learn how to listen, how to be supportive, how to be there for those that are going through grief. And from that standpoint, I think it's helpful if we as a community, to learn how to support one another through that grieving process.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to another topic, and it is around stigma. So we wanted to touch on stigma that surrounds the topic of just dealing with grief and seeking help from outside the church. So seeking help from a medical professional, whether it be mental health or some strategies that are outside of the church, and maybe how each one of those who are on the panel today have utilized that, in their careers, and why that would be beneficial within the church context as well. And we'll start with Pastor Wilson.
Yeah, there's definitely a stigma in community about death and dying. I mean, in my profession, if I were to introduce my patients, as the patient's coming, so as I said, I work in hospice care, and I have to call the families. The nurse calls, they're like, I'm coming there to help with whatever, wound care or medication, and social worker comes, and here comes a chaplain, like I'm the chaplain. Oh, no, we don't need you. Because chaplain represents almost like an angel of death. Like, why are you coming? Nobody's dying yet. So that is a stigma itself. It's basically somebody has taught them that chaplains show up at the last minute to do the funeral, or right when somebody's about to die, the chaplain walks in to do the prayer and things like that. Now that's not true, obviously, as I'm sure you all know. The chaplain's role is not just to be there for the funeral. I mean, this is for the family also. And so we tend to describe our role as, well, we are here to support the family, just to see if you have anything to talk about, or just to sit with you. And sometimes the conversation may be about baseball. It may have nothing to do with experience of loss at that moment. But stigma related to you know, like for example, I don't want to see a psychologist. I am grieving. I know I need help, and somebody has told them you need help, and they admit they need help, but I can't go to quote-unquote secular resources out there because my church will whisper behind my back saying they have some problem. You know, in our community especially, there's stigma that if you're getting help from outside, let's say you're seeing a counselor, you're seeing a psychologist, somebody, oh, there's something wrong. You're spiritually, you're not dealing well with it, that's why you're going outside, which could be seen as a taboo, you shouldn't do that. And sadly, because not the best kind of help is coming from the church, and they're not able to go out to get the help, who is suffering, the person who is grieving, already on the loss of their loved one, is now suffering even more because they can't get the help that they want and they need. So I think this kind of stigma is prevalent in our community, and I know there are good counselors in our community now, Christian Indian counselors, but I think our community is still very close to it, and I think this is where discussions like this are very important, so people understand that it's okay and it's actually good to avail those kind of resources.
I agree. I think we as a community, we have a lot of resources within the community that we could definitely draw on. I think that in instances of grief, it's appropriate to draw on, but also even reaching beyond our community. I think we've touched a little bit about the stigmas, about seeking mental health professionals or counselors in that area. I think it's something that if you're a leader in your church, you need to explore what relationships that you as a church can develop to kind of help support this. Just as an example, in our own church, we kind of reached out to a group of Christian counselors. Now, this is before we had like any kind of grief or anything, and it's just still a relationship that's kind of developing. But the person who founded this practice has done a Master of Divinity at Trinity International Seminary, and he also has a Master's in Clinical Health, and so clinical mental health. And all the people that are under him are Christian counselors. And so to kind of like overcome the stigma, we set up a session for our church where these counselors came in and just talked to our church, developed a relationship. And so we now use them as a resource that the pastor could say, hey, you know what? These are people that we know, that we want you to be able to know as well. Now, there are things where you can come to your pastor and receive counseling in that way, and I think there's great benefit to that. But maybe there's some things that you need to talk to someone who, from a Christian perspective and also a therapeutic perspective, can help you along, and that's very valuable as well. I don't want to discount what the value of the pastor is, but I firmly believe this, and if there's a saying, all truth is God's truth. All truth is God's truth. So if God has put so many resources here, it's up to us to use them to help us overcome.
Thank you. Pastor Sam, we are addressing the topic of stigma around stigma around seeking help from resources outside of the church. If you could weigh in on that.
Sure, thank you, Maureen. I think there's a general stigma about seeking help with regard to mental health concerns in our community. And I think that obviously extends to bereavement support and grief as well. Obviously prayer is important, but there's a feeling that anything else it's excessive. Yeah. So I think group work is a good option for seeking help outside of the church. And Pastor Wilson may be able to speak more to this, but if grief that comes after a loss, there are many hospice programs that offer support, group support, which I think is helpful help facilitate groups for those that are dealing with grief. There's this power in working together in a group. So that's something that I think may be more feasible for the church, is to perhaps having grief support within the church. I hope that answers your question. I apologize that I can't really be engaged with some of the technical difficulties that we're having.
No, we appreciate everyone sharing. Maybe this would be a good time to kind of engage our audience as well. Like we said in the first part, there are different reasons why everyone connected to coming to this workshop. So if you are in the audience today and you are in the allied health or medical health profession, if there is any insight that you're willing to share, or maybe you are a student that's looking to go into the profession and wanting to see how you could find some resources to connect with people that are in need. Let's take a few minutes to kind of open up to the audience. Don't have any audience members, I'm going to look back to our panel and see in your individual careers. The next question would be, what are some strategies that you have found useful in your careers, and then you think that if we would bring that into the South Asian church community, that they would benefit from that as well? So I will let Pastor Wilson start that off.
Yeah, and I would again go back to, because it's in the church context that we're talking about, is the role of the church to talk about this and have discussions. To hear Pastor Josh talk about how they've reached out to the community of counselors and have the church listen to them, and that kind of removes the cloud of the taboo related to that. And also to kind of preach about it and testify. So listening to the testimonies of Merle's testimony of how she went through it, I can only imagine what someone else is going through right now who may be going through a similar situation, what an impact that would have on their life. And just to add a small piece, I mean, some of you know this, but Greta and I, just to show the power of helping and sharing your testimonies, we didn't have children for 6-7 years of our marriage, and God blessed us miraculously with our son. First thing that I did was, I really wanted to do it, and finally we got about to do it, was I put a YouTube video with our testimony. Within days, like getting this text message saying, thank you, we're going through the same thing. And your testimony has helped us to be strong in faith, to know people are out there who are going through the same experiences as we are, and be connected with you. Imagine someone, let's say, in a similar situation in this context, where people have gone through grief, and let's say there's a community, which I hope, as we discussed, may come out of this also, where we talk to each other, that you have people you're talking to who are grieving and who have gone through grief, and they understand there's something about sharing the experience that connects the two people. So that's one. And second, I think from the scripture also I think we should be emphasizing the role or the fact that it's okay to grieve. One of my favorite verses when I was growing up as a kid was, in the memory verse competition, was Jesus wept, right? Jesus wept, and if you look at the original language, it's not just like a little tear. Wept is a deeper sense, like it's like his friend, Lazarus, died. So you sit and read the book and you're like, well, he's going to raise him. Why is he crying? He's going to do a great miracle, bring him back to life. Why is he still crying? That's because it's grief. He was grieving. Even though there's a resurrection or the coming back to life that's going to happen. If Jesus had to experience that, I mean, here I am sitting here. And if somebody were to tell me, oh, don't grieve as if you're not a Christian, I mean, that's not very biblical. I mean, I don't want to sound heretical here, but we should be careful about exegeting and interpreting scriptures as if every believer should be strong in times of grief. Don't show any emotions. And cultural layer here, many cultures have this, and men don't show emotions, don't cry, like don't show tears, like around your wife or family. it's a lot of these kind of things that we have to be very careful about, that we should be applying. And the third thing, the last thing I'll mention here is educate. Information is key. If you're getting ready for a wedding, you work through a wedding person, right? Or somebody who kind of plan, basically, does everything for you. They know the flowers, they know where to go. So you assign a person for that. Why is it that when somebody's going through grief or loss, there's no one we can go to? I need help. Other than just the funeral homes, which is not always in our best interest, why is there no one in our community we can be like, I need help planning things out, live streaming. It could be, how do I get, which funeral home should I pick? What's the cost range? What am I dealing with here? We should have resources in our community. If somebody has done it, I think they should step forward to help our community. I've gone through this, and I want to pick it up as my ministry to people in my community, right? So I think that's also a key that we should encourage in our church for people to step up. So, a few points.
That's very helpful. One of the things that I feel that in our community, the way that we're supposed to minister is we're supposed to minister out of the love that we've received. Think about your relationship with Christ. Think about how Christ approaches you. We are to be his hands and his feet. We're supposed to love on other people in that same way. Now, this takes a very broad stroke. It means a lot of different things in a lot of different situations. But expressing that love, coming alongside the hurting, coming alongside the broken. It says in the scripture, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Well, part of the blessing is that they shall receive comfort. I think a lot of times in our community, we don't know what to say, so we don't say. And that absence is often very felt. Just come alongside to show the love of Christ. In my own experience, among my family, I started doing this thing. Every time that I leave from a place, no matter where it is, I'm going to see them the next day. I said, okay, I'll say to my brothers and my sisters, all right, I love you, I'll see you later. And what? The first reaction I got from my youngest sister was, she was like, all right. I said, all right, Joyce, I love you. And she's like, are you dying or something? You don't have to say that. It's not often expressed in our community. But that expression has to take place. There has to be that comforting. We have to show the love of Christ. Now, is that a verbal expression? Is that a non-verbal expression? We talked about there are different ways of expressing it. But the key piece there, I think, is to listen. Listen and then come alongside. Hear and trust that the Holy Spirit's going to guide you in doing this. He empowers us for every good work. And then just step forward in that faith. Just show the love of Christ.
Thank you. And then we'll wrap up that question with Pastor Sam on the line. If you could share any strategies that you use in your career as a social worker that you would think would benefit the South Asian community.
Okay, great. This is something that we have mentioned, but I think we need to leverage the resources we already have in the church. I think in most Panelists, there are people that are willing to talk, and they just not know quite how to do it. So my strategy or my thought is to actually have some training to help support. Did I lose you guys?
So I'm having a little difficult time here. Okay, we may have
Okay, great, thank you. So one of the strategies that I would like to propose to have training for lay teachers who can help support pastoral. Because one thing that I notice a lot is that whenever there is loss in a church, the pastor understandably is the person that he that helping to support the family, but there is this distrust because they're perhaps helping with the funeral planning, with supporting the family, the grief, and all of that. And how wonderful would it be to have a group of trained volunteers within the church, ministry even workers, who can help pastor with the things that he's doing. So what I would suggest is to help train those that are interested how to help support those that are grieving, provide that peer support, prayer support. It seems like you just mobilize and help the grieving family, all the things that it needs to do. This is something that I've tried yet, but something that I haven't very interested in making. Because it helps those that are want to do something and they're not sure what to do. It helps them have a very specific purpose and role in the whole process.
If I may just add, I was just kind of going through our songbook yesterday. If you look at the back pages, there's a lot of people who have, certification in realtors. There are realtors. There's people helping with vacations. Can you imagine someday you open the thing and something says Indian funeral planning services? I mean, that itself would be a helpful tool to so many of our people in our community, something that's tailored to Christians, Pentecostals, Indians, and that would, just sitting here, can you imagine how much it would help for people who would be going through a similar situation? The second thing is, going back to the education piece I was talking about, my dad, who's also a chaplain, is doing his thesis for his doctoral program and doing research among our Indian community. We talked about this yesterday. And in his research, he is finding out that many of the people in our community do not have information about things like hospice care, comfort measures, or how your insurance pays for a lot of the bills that are accumulated because of the treatments and things like that. And one of the highest percentage of people, the answer is nobody told us. I didn't know. That's because we don't talk about these kind of things. And it's only after the fact they find out, oh, I could have had a lot of help from the government and insurance companies or people, volunteer organizations who would be like more than happy to help me with, my mom's or whatever, dad's care, grandparents' care, people coming at homes to help them change, wash. And there's so many small things you don't think about. And there is resources in community. Unfortunately, our community does not always know that. So I think that's another area we should be something we should focus on. So get the word out. There's resources out there.
Absolutely. So I think in terms of questions, I think we're kind of wrapping up with questions for our panel. But to kind of recap from the first part to our second part, the point of putting this workshop together, the interest and the reason behind it is that, when we do experience grief and we are going through loss, and we are able to, at least to an outside world, we look like we're able to manage it in one sense. For us, it's a testament of our faith. It doesn't go to anything else. The credit doesn't go to anyone else but to God. And, God's word tells us He's a God of comfort. And if God is a God of comfort and we believe that and we profess that, how do we share God's comfort in a practical way to our neighbors? And our neighbors are not always Malayali Christians, right? Our neighbors are coming from other religions, other faiths. They practice in a different way, but how do we be, as Pastor Josh said, the hands and feet of Christ, not just to Christians, but to others as well? And from what I gathered from a lot of our conversation from this morning is that it's more about what you do, it's more about your actions than the words that you use. So if we could be mindful of how we interact with people, and how can we show the love of Christ through actions, because sharing a Bible verse at the moment that someone just said that a loved one passed away, me personally, having gone through, a couple of rounds of loss, while there's power in the Word of God, I never deny that. But at that very moment, it really doesn't resonate. It just does kind of somehow come out as words, right? So instead of just, talking, maybe is there something that we could actually do? And, every small act of kindness matters. It means something and it holds value. So don't think that, just because it's a small thing that you can do, that it doesn't have any value. It really does. And that's coming from somebody who's experienced that, right? And then also, how do we as a community, as we said from the morning, how do we kind of come together, to support people through the resources? We're a very educated community. The Lord has blessed us with the privileges of, education, finances, and how do we, share that with others in our community? Don't keep it to yourself, right? And so if you, as we said, if you, have people in your local church that are willing to come together on a volunteer basis, right, and form, like a support group for people that are going through grief or going through loss. Be proactive. Be that person to start that support group. Maybe nobody else has done that in your local church. Well, be that change. Be the person to do that. And I promise you, once the churches in your regional area, whether it's in Chicago or you're in Dallas, Fort Worth, or you're somewhere in Austin, you're in Philadelphia. Now I don't know where everyone's joining us from today, but once people hear of that, it's going to be something that others want to join in and want to be a part of, because every church is going to experience this. Every community is going to experience it at some point. And I know the focus of the session today was really about connecting with the South Asian community, but there are other communities, other cultures that are neighbors to your culture, right? And so, the Lord has blessed my husband and I with the privilege of living in other countries, experiencing other cultures, and I'm telling you, when it comes to death, when it comes to loss, when it comes to grieving, we are all the same. At the end of the day, we're humans. That's how God created us, to be relational people, regardless of your faith, regardless of, your commitment to Christianity. God has called us to be relational to people. And so your brothers and sisters are not always going to be Christians. They're not going to be Pentecostals. They're not going to be Indian. So ask the Holy Spirit, how can I bless those around me that don't look like me, that don't speak like me, that, don't come from the same cultural roots that I come from. And I truly believe that, as we profess that God is a God of comfort, He's not just a God of comfort for believers, right? And for others as well. So I think with that, we would be able to wrap up our session for this morning. There's another group that's coming in for the next session, so I just want to be respectful of time. But this is not a conversation that ends in PCNAK 2019. This is something that those of us who have been part of both panels this morning are passionate about, carrying this forward throughout the year. So please, do not hesitate to connect with any one of us. All of us are on Facebook. We're on various social media platforms, and we'd love to get this conversation going, outside of PCNAK. So whether it's social media or it's something we'd like to actually coordinate at a local level at your churches, get in contact with us and let's think outside of the box. Let's be creative and see how we can bless others that are